The supposed of our learning should be a panacea. We're going to start a new parak. Is that correct? That's where we're holding, right? A new parak. Halacha Aleph. It's on Testament base. The Mishnah says, Truma Maya Isimba. Said that they would take money out of the room that was called the Truma. They would put it into baskets. There were 3 baskets and they would do it 3 times. And what would they do with this money? Like they would buy the regular sacrifices, the extra sacrifices for holidays, and the wine that came along with that. That may also include the flour as well. The meal offering that was brought from barley on the 2nd day of Pesach. Shtei lechem, the 2 loaves of bread that were brought on Shavuos. Lechem apanim, the bread that was brought every week. B'chol kabanos hatzibur, and all the community sacrifices. Shemrei tzvichim b'shviyas. If it was a Shemitah year, they needed to get their Omer offering from grain that grew wild, because no one was planting it and cultivating it. So if it grew wild, they would have to send people out to make sure that the animals didn't eat it up. If it was in the wild, it wasn't really, no one was protecting it. I guess it grew randomly from the wind or whatever, the seeds fell. And so people would have to watch that grain. So they would take also from the Truma Salishka, from this Truma that was taken out of the shekel coin. Rabbi Yossi says, it says, actually, yes, this could have been done, but if there's an individual that decided he wanted to watch some wild grain, barley that was growing, he can watch it for free, and then he can give it to the temple also. It doesn't have to be that it's all done under this fund. Client. Yeah, this is a little different. Oh, I don't know. Right. Let's see at the end of the Mishnah, which the end of the next Mishnah, maybe some more information about that. So far, we're really just discussing sacrifices.
The moment you start saying Shomer, so that
I hear. Rabbi Yossi afraid to that he can give it as a gift. Amrullah, they responded to Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafti, is a Tana. They responded to him, but you must agree that it needs to be community funds. And here you're saying that it's coming from a private individual. We don't want a private individual to do a community sacrifice. Community sacrifice needs to come from the community. And here you have this one guy that's I'm going to contribute to. It's coming from my neighbor's backyard or something, whatever, some park area that I've been watching all season. Okay. What Rabbi Yossi himself holds is that, yeah, it's coming from a private individual, but he's donating it to the community fund. It's all donations to the community funds, and he's donating it. And they're saying, well, we don't know if he really donated it fully. Maybe he still has something he still wants something from it. It's not 100% of a gift, and then it comes out that it wasn't really a community offering. Okay, 1 second. Here we're discussing a Mishnah in Tainus. It says that there were 9 families that would give wood when they came up from the Babylonian exile. They didn't have enough wood, and there were 9 families that contributed wood. just to make sure that there was fuel for the sacrifices. These days that they would give the wood was considered a holiday. So Marazman Atzikainim Amli Manis. What caused this to be counted as a holiday? When the Jewish people came back from the Babylonian exile, there was no wood in the room. It doesn't mean that they came back from the exile and they were expecting to find wood in a room. It means that they came from the exile, they started to build a temple, and they started to have it function. They would find that there wasn't wood there. Right? It wasn't that they were just expecting it to appear. It was they didn't have the means. These people, these 9 families stood up. They, on their own, voluntarily, they donated this wood. They gave it over to the community. And the sacrifices were brought from this wood that was donated by these individual families. Now the prophets that were there, just Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, they decreed that even if a time will come that that these people won't be needed, but because they stood up at a time when it was needed. And these people will come and will also give wood, even though their wood won't be needed because they have others. We're going to use their wood. It's going to be priority given to them always because of what they did during that time. Amar Ravacha, Rabbi Yossi. That interesting quote, maybe it's part of the Mishnah or explanation for the Mishnah. That's only the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. What he means is Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta said that a private individual can stand guard to watch the Omer. So therefore, his opinion would also be that private individuals can contribute the wood. However, the rabbis would say that responded to Rabbi Yossi, we don't let private individuals contribute these communal things. These are things for the community. Rabbi Yossi, not to be confused with Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, this is Rabbi Yossi and Amira. Rabbi Yossi or Rabasi, that would make it easier on us to switch it to Rabasi. B'shem Rabbi Ila, Divrei Hakali. He says, no, I know there's an argument in the Mishnah about the Omer grain, the barley grain. However, this Mishnah that we have in Tainus about the wood, that even the rabbis would agree could be contributed by these individual families. Mapligan. So then what's the argument between Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan in our Mishnah about the Omer? That's begufay shel karban. We're talking about an actual sacrifice itself. Aval b'machshirei karban, when it comes to the what's machshir prerequisites, something the things that come along that allow the carbon to be brought. Yeah, the preparations for the carbon, which would be referring to the wood. Everyone would agree that you can take private donations and turn them into communal sacrifices or preparations for sacrifices. The commentaries explain here that what's happening is if a communal sacrifice was actually brought from private funds, it wouldn't be valid. However, if preparations for a sacrifice would be private funds, even though we don't want that, we want it to be communal funds, but it would be valid b'di'evet. If it would be kosher b'di'evet, if it would be done like that, so then we'll also accept lechatchila if the person transfers it to the community. Now we may have a chashash that maybe he didn't transfer it properly, he still has something in his mind that he doesn't want it to go 100%. So since b'di'evet, it's going to be good anyway. Safe goes safe. How bad is it going to get? It's still going to be kosher. We say, okay, so let it pass. But if it would be sacrifice itself, that could be really bad. We don't accept it. So the machlekes, according to, is this Ravacha? Rabbi Yosi b'shem Rabila, I'm sorry. Rabbi Yosi b'shem Rabila is that our Mishnah in Tainus is according to everyone. Everyone would agree to that. According to Rabbi Acha, the Mishnah in Tainus was only Rabbi Yosi. Okay. Tani was taught, Isha she'asta kseinas libna. I was learning that the first time, Levena. And I was trying to figure out who wears the white one. So this is something that I'm not familiar with. Now, what's happening is, a woman, her son is a Kayan, and she makes him clothing for his birthday, a new sweater.
You were thinking white,
Right.
and I heard
Oh.
brick.
How do you say white? Yeah, how would you say?
Levana.
Levana.
Comma.
Right, Levana.
Someone said Levana. Brick.
Right. A white brick for her son. So she made this for her son. Sounds nice. Sounds nice. What happens? It's kosher. It's kosher. However, she has to give it over to the community.
After the first wash, anyone else can.
Yeah, after the first wash, right? So so actually, I think it was only it wasn't used more than once. I'm not sure how it was.
The regular cut.
Was it just the Kohen Gadol? Oh, yeah, the number on the back for the Kohanim team. So now, what's the issue over here? Issue here is that the clothing of the Kohanim also came from community funds. So here we have a private individual, this woman, that she's giving something that's for the community from her own. Maybe she's not giving it over 100%.
Where would that concept fit in? Under what?
So this is discussing if a private individual can guard the grain of the yomer and then give it over. We're making this comparison here. Yeah.
Fine. Why is it like it's not a complete 20%? When you do when everyone is in, it's just that everyone gets one.
Right.
So, it's not that everyone gets having it.
Right. I think usually when it comes to community funds, everyone gives the shekel, and everyone has an equal amount in that. It's given over to the community, and no one says that. I'm not really sure if I'm still holding on to that. Sometimes people give a donation, and they come back and they claim how they want it to be. Right? You can imagine. But that's that. No one's going to do that when each one gives a shekel. Problem is when someone claims I'm going to donate that whole thing, and then he still claims that he has some sort of ownership. He didn't give it over 100%. Then when it's offered, it's not really offered as a community thing. It's still he's still attached to it. So here we have the community, the clothing, the uniform. It comes from the community fund, right? And now, who owns the police uniform? The people themselves, or is it from Naftali?
I bought my own.
You buy your own.
I did when I did there.
Interesting. An army uniform you get to keep, right? It's your own. Do they supply it for you? So whatever the case is, this comes from community. This woman is making it for her son. So is she really giving it over to the community or not? So over here, we're saying that it's perfectly fine. It sounds like the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. I mean, that would be easy to say it's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Comes along, Amar Ravacha, the Rabbi Yossi. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi operates a misnader shem rechinim. Just like by the Omer, you can have an individual that gives it over. So to this woman is giving it over. Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Ila divrei hakol. And then Rabbi Yossi says, no, this is everyone. Ma'pligan. So what it was the machlekes in our Mishnah about the Omer, that was begufei shel karban. Av machshiri karban kolam amaydi shemishtana karban yachad karban tzibur. Same machlekes. Maybe this is not an actual sacrifice. So everyone would agree, even the rabbis would agree.
Here's an example from the earlier. By the way, his daughter was supposed to university. This guy donated some land in a swamp to the university. No strings attached. I mean, his name is attached. He owned the land around the lake. So the university made a whole lot of money out of it. Hotels and gas stations.
It's a genius.
Stores.
It's a genius.
It was attached to him.
It's great. It doesn't say that you can't do that. The professor's telling us about a guy that donated land to the university, but he kept the land around the university. So when the university developed, he made money off of all of that because he put stores and that's great. Okay. So yeah, but here we have all the rental houses. So someone that develops like the shul or the restaurants or something is really, if he owns the rental houses as part of his, he would get income from that. Okay, a new Disney. So Masnisin Pligi al Rabbi Yossi, we have a brisa that's going to argue with Rabbi Yossi. The Gra changes this girsa in the Taklin Chadatin. This commentary here, I think it's Rabbi Yisrael Mishkla. He's a student of the Gra. He moved to Eretz Yisrael, but in that time when the Chassidim moved, Talmidei Gra also moved, and he wrote. Oh, what did he wrote? He wrote the halachos of Eretz Yisrael. I forgot the name of the sefer. It was an important sefer. When they moved over there, they needed to know all of the. Yeah. So anyway, he's a student of the Gra. He follows the Gra, everything the Gra's versions. He switches this exactly the opposite. He says, not that the Mishnah has a question on Rabbi Yossi, which is the words of it. He switches it to Masnisin Pligi al Ravacha. Mishnah argues on Ravacha. Ravacha says that it's only the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that would accept something like this. He says, I'm going to show you a brisa that it's not so, that everyone would accept this personal contribution that would go for the community. Because it says, those days that we said were holidays for those 9 families, actually, those holidays apply not only during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that's what's called B'shas Karban. Even after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, we still don't say Tachnan or whatever the relevance would be on those days. Those families would keep it. Now, what was that wood going for? If it was going for community sacrifices, then we can understand why it extends afterward. But if it was for private sacrifices that they were going to use that wood, so then why would it be a holiday even not when the Beis Hamikdash is around? And we want to say that this is not just an individual opinion, this is even the opinion of the Rabbanan. So if these holidays continue after the destruction of the temple, then it must be that everyone agrees that things that are not the actual sacrifice can be contributed. Another issue, min hada, from the following: the Tanya Amar Rabbi Lazar Bei Rabbi Tzadok. I guess it means Rabbi Lazar Bar Tzadok. Anu hayino mibnei Sana ben Binyamin. We were descendants of Bnei Sana ben Binyamin. This is one of the families that contributed the wood. And the Chal Tisha B'Av Lias B'Shabbos, and Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos that year, they would contribute wood. Their holiday was the 10th of Av. What happens when Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos is that it gets pushed off to Sunday, which is the 10th of Av. Shabbos. Tisha B'Av was pushed off. Problem is, Motzei Shabbos for them was a holiday. Sunday, that was the 10th of Av, was their holiday. So we would fast, but we wouldn't complete the fast. When was this taking place? It was after the destruction of the temple, or else they wouldn't have been fasting on Tisha B'Av. Now the truth is, Tisha B'Av was the destruction of the first temple as well. But when the second temple was built, they didn't fast on Tisha B'Av on that day. It was only it came back after the destruction of the temple. Yeah, this is the commentators are speaking this out very clearly. But that's a historical question. Did they fast on Tisha B'Av during the second temple because of the first temple? Yeah, we hear it saying no. And so, if they were fasting on Tisha B'Av, it must be it was after the destruction. If it was after the destruction, they're still celebrating the holiday because of the donations of wood. It must have been that those donations were community donations, were community sacrifices. If that's the case, then we're seeing that it's not just the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, it must be everyone's opinion that holds that things that aren't the actual sacrifice can be coming from an individual. Okay. He said all of this comes from the truma from the lishka, from the shkalim. Then it goes on and it says that people would be guarding the grain, the wild grain that was growing in Shemitah. Masnisin de Rabbi Yishmael Aimer, Ein Haimer ba min Asuria. Why would they need to guard the grain? Because they needed to get grain for the Aimer. And it was the Shemitah year. If they didn't have the Shemitah year, they wouldn't be able to get it. If they didn't have the guards there, they wouldn't be able to get it during Shemitah. However, it's possible that they can get it from an area that doesn't have the restrictions of Shemitah, which that would be Syria. However, Rabbi Yishmael holds that you can't get the Aimer grain from Syria. So that's why you need the Shomrim there. Taman Tanin, and it was taught over there, Kol Kabanas Yachid Vatzibur Bar Min Haaretz, Min HaChutz Laaretz, Min HaChadash, Min HaYashan, Chutz Min HaAimer, Shtei Alechem, Shem Ban Ela, Min HaChadash, Min HaAretz. Sacrifices can be brought from other places. In other words, the animals don't have to be Israel raised animals. And also the grain doesn't have to be grown in Israel. With the exception of the Aimer and the Shtei Alechem, that needs to come from Israel. And also it needs to come from this year's crop. The Aimer and the Shtei Alechem. Other sacrifices come from last year's crop. They couldn't be from a storage. You can bring from last year's grain. It doesn't have. Yeah. Rav Huna b'Shem Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yishmael. He says this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael Aimer ein Aimer ba min Syria. It has to be Rabbi Yishmael because otherwise we would say that you can bring the Aimer from Syria, from the grain that grew over there. Taman Tanina was taught the first Mishnah in Kalim. Eser Kedusha saying there's 10 levels of holiness. Eretz Yisrael Mekadesh Mikol Haratzis. Israel is holier than the rest of the land. My Kedusha, so what is its holiness? It describes what each level is. That the Omer, which is the barley sacrifice on the second day of Pesach, and the Bikurim, the first fruits, and the 2 loaves of bread and Shavuos are brought from the land of Israel, not from the other lands. Rav Chia, Rav Huna, Shem Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Rabbi Yishmael. This has to be the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Otherwise, it could be brought from Syria. The Rabbi Yishmael, because Rabbi Yishmael holds it can't be brought from Syria. So it's only the land of Israel. The discussion here about Syria has to do with that Syria was conquered by David HaMelech, but it wasn't at the time when the rest of the Israel was conquered. So it was considered kibush yachid. It was considered that it was conquered like only for David's family. It wasn't incorporated into the land of Israel. So it has a little bit like Israel, a little bit not like Israel. So it has some laws of Israel. So Tamantanin and Rabbi Shmuel Eimer Machar Rishus Havkat Rishus. Okay, here's an interesting thing. The pasuk says that you should rest from harvest on the 7th. It doesn't say is it the 7th day or the 7th year. It's both, but it's machlekes, of course. So the Tanna Kama says that it doesn't have to tell me resting on Shabbos from plowing, because I know you're not allowed to plow on Shabbos. It's talking about Shemitah, and it's coming to tell me that even after the Shemitah is over, those things that are still growing from the Shemitah, I can't harvest them either. Moitzi Shvius. However, Rabbi Shmuel says no, Moitzi Shvius you're allowed to harvest. The pasuk is actually talking about Shabbos itself. So Yatzuk Tziraimer. So it says like this, that what we're allowed to do, you have to rest from harvest. However, only harvesting on the Shemitah itself, you have to rest from harvesting, but only harvesting that's voluntary. However, Yatzuk Tziraimer Shu Mitzvah, excluding the harvesting of the Aimer, which is brought. There's 2 points here. One is that I harvest the Aimer on Shabbos itself, and I also harvest the Aimer on Shemitah. Okay, if I can do it on Shabbos, I can also do it on Shemitah. Because the origin of this is Rabbi Shmuel's opinion that I do it on Shabbos, but that would extend that also Shemitah. Now Rabbi Shmuel Kedaitei, this follows Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. Rabbi Shmuel Kedaitei, the Rabbi Shmuel, the Amar, Eino Aimer Bam in Asuria. Kedaitei the Amar Yatzuk Tziraimer Shu Mitzvah. Okay. If I could get it from Syria, then I wouldn't need to harvest it during the Shemitah, because I would get it from Syria where the Shemitah laws don't apply. So it must be that this is Rabbi Shmuel, following Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, that says that I can't get it from Syria. Who's the one that says that the ones that are guarding those wild growths of the Omer, of the barley grain, take their money, take their payment from the Trumas Alishka? It has to be Rabbi Shmuel. Otherwise, why do I need people to guard? Take the wagon up to Syria, up north. Get the grain from there. You don't need guards to stand there all year. You go up there. There's no Shemitah issues. They have regular fields and harvest grain and take it down. Rabbi Yossi Divrei Akoli. Rabbi Yossi says this is Rabbi Yossi, not a Tana. This is an Amora. He says it doesn't have to be Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. It could really be everyone's opinion. They didn't find any grain in Syria, so they had to come to get guards to watch. And why was there no grain in Syria? I don't know. Yeah, whatever happened. Hahein Aimer Maush Yisra Betchila. Maul Israel Tchila. If you're allowed to harvest the Aimer on the Shemitah, are you allowed to plant it also? It's like really extending pushing the limits. So if you can, if the Aimer is a mitzvah, so we should be able to plant as well. Rab Chia Barada Boy Kumi Rab Mana. Rab Chia. Yeah. So I guess that they could probably get from outside of the land of Israel. Yeah, we had Italian wines the other day. Revius, Yain Italca.
By the way,
Was it the measurement? Oh, really? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, I saw 2 comments. That's why I wasn't sure which way to take it. One was that it was the revius of Italki. It was an Italian measurement. Hold on. Okay, whatever the case is here, he says like this. If I planted grain on Shemitah and then I harvested it, and it's all for the Aimer, it's all for the holy, for good reasons. Now, good intentions. What would I be allowed to do after I brought the Aimer? Now, the Aimer, the way it was brought is that you take part of it, I think it's put on the altar. Part of it is put on the altar, and then the rest is eaten. Now, if I can't eat it because a prohibition was performed with it, because it was planted in Shemitah, so then he says like this: you're making it like a sacrifice where you can't eat the rest of it. You're not supposed to bring a sacrifice if you're not going to be able to eat the rest. So if you're going to plant it, it's going to be a prohibition. And I know, well, there's a problem with the way he's asking the questions. Well, because he's asking, let it become permissible. He's asking, let it be permissible. So we're answering, if it's prohibited, he's not going to be able to eat it. So how's he going to do it? But that wasn't our question. Our question is, let it be permissible, because if you're allowed to harvest it, you should be allowed to plant. Anyway, whatever the case is. Amalei, he responds to him anyway. He says, we have this in other cases. You have certain things that are brought when it's impure, and we're not allowed to eat it. But nevertheless, it's brought. So here also, we'll call it that you're not allowed to eat it. We'll say it's like brought in impurity. You're not allowed to eat it. Granted, you can't eat the remnants of the Omer sacrifice because it was cultivated in Shemitah. But so what? Sometimes it's still kosher. Okay, now the Gemara says, how do we get the money from being consecrated? Consecrated money. How do we get that over as payment to these people? What are they going to do? They're going to be holding on to money that's sanctified. What are they going to do with it? How can they? We have to get the money into their hands with getting the sanctity off it. We're paying these people. Yeah, we had something on that one. Yeah. How would you say money laundering in this way? So it goes like this. First, you take a loan. You borrow money. You take money from a money changer, from a banker. Then you pay the workers. You pay the people that harvested. You pay the guards for them. Actually, this is for all of their work that they did before the Aimer was brought. Maybe mais michuma salishka. Now what I do is like this. I take money from the Truma Salishka, from those coins, from the Shekalim, and I take the barley for the Aimer, and I say that the holiness of these coins should go onto the barley. And then I take these coins, which have now been redeemed, and I go and I pay back the banker that I borrowed the money from. So they get paid, and then I pay the banker back for with after the Aimer's purchase, that money goes out. It says V'tavoskein, is this acceptable to do this? The commentaries explain that the issue here is that they're getting much more money than the value of the actual Aimer itself. Because when the money is being redeemed by purchasing of the barley, they had to take that barley and they had to sift it down on 13 sifters or a whole bunch. They're basically left with like a tenth or something, or a hundredth of what it was originally. So they did all that work. The actual value of the barley is much less than the money that they're getting. So the Gemara is asking, were you allowed to redeem this money on so little barley and so much money, and that you're going to use to pay them back? So, but apparently it doesn't cover, the quality doesn't cover the that cost. There's the increase of that quality. So Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rav Acha b'shem Rabbi Ba, kol ma sheyitin hinin dama mishar rishayna. I don't know what the Gemara is answering. The Gemara may be answering that you're right. They're actually not making as much as they should. Or the Gemara may be answering that somehow we're allowed to do this. I don't know what it means. Well, I mean, the words of the Gemara is, yes, that is their money from the original time. What does that mean? I think according to the Takum Charatin, it means you're right. They're not making that much money. Now, the Gemara compares this to exactly to another case, which was Tana af the Pischei Avanim Kain. Pischei Avanim is the people that would cut stones for the Beis Hamikdash. They had to replace something. Kate said, "I say, how would they be paid?" So, they take the money from the bank of they would take from the quarriers and the people that would chisel the stones. Before it was put into the row, it was probably a row of stones, but it was being replaced. They would have to put it back in. So first they would pay them, but then when they would actually take that stone, maybe money was taken from the coins of the temple. They would use that to purchase that stone. That means that those coins that were holy, the holiness was transferred over to the stones, and that's that money that was now lost, it's deconsecrated, would now be used to pay the banker. The Tavas came, can you do that? But the stone must have been, they must have had to take out more work than what they're actually making. Well, Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rav Acha b'shem Rabbi Bun b'shem Shmuel kol ma shetitin hinin demem sharishayna. I guess which means that they aren't, you're right, they're not being paid that full amount, they're being paid whatever the stones were worth. Okay, next Mishnah. Para v'sara mishtale. Let's go slowly. Para. The para duma. V'sara mishtaleach. The goat that's sent off the cliff, right? Azazel. V'lashain shel zahiris. This is a thread of wool, of red wool, scarlet wool. What was this done? What was done? So the commentators say there's a whole bunch of different things that the red thread was used for. Let's say over here, we're going to have some complications. Let's say we're talking about the paraduma. It was put into the paraduma, into the burning. It was one of the ingredients in the paraduma. Yeah, and Rachel's Kever Rachel. So, Boin Michumas Alishka, that came from the funds from the Shekalim. These are sacrifices, right? Easy, comes from the Shekalim. Keves para, keves para. They say Riam, keves, right? The Riam, keves, keves. The ram, kevesh. I'm sorry. Yeah. So what happened is the paraduma. There was a machlekes between the rabbis and the Sadducees. If someone that was tamei but went to the mikveh was allowed to perform the service of the paraduma, the rabbi said yes. The Sadducees no. They had to wait for nightfall. So because of that, we would actually get people that were tamei, specifically, that went to the mikveh to be involved in the paraduma, just to show that we don't hold up what they're there. Now, but because we did that, people would start to be lenient with the paraduma, so we made extra precautions. It was strict on the other side. So we said that they have to walk over, we're afraid that they're going to walk on something that's impure down to the bedrock. So we made these ramps with hollow spaces underneath, so that the tumah doesn't spread up. So they had to have a ramp that went across the mountain. So that ramp, they also had a ramp that got the kohen out of the Beis Hamikdash, because they would pull his hair. They were hurrying him up. The Babylonians that were there would pull his hair. I don't know exactly what they wanted, but to avoid that, they made a ramp to get him out quickly. Now there's also another thread that went between the horns of the goat that was pushed off. And the water channel that went through the base of Mikdash, if it needed fixing. It was an aqueduct. The wall of the city and also the towers. Not from the Trumas Halishka, but after the Trumas Halishka was taken, there were coins that were left over. That was considered community funds that would support these other construction things. Abishal says no. The Kayanim Gedalim that this was their project, so they would build this with their own funds. Let's say there was money left over from the leftover funds. So they would buy wine, oil, and flour, and they would sell it to people that needed it coming to the temple. Right? Can you imagine at the big fairs, everyone's selling all types of things? So, to be used in the karma. Right. So things that they're gonna need over there at the temple. So Divrei Rabbi Shmuel, the Rabbi Shmuel says that who would make the money on that? He says, well, Hekdesh would make money. Rabbi Kiva says you don't make money. Hekdesh doesn't go into the small businesses to make this little money, as if we're gonna put together a few little cents from these booths that are selling these things, and also not from money that was collected from the poor. You don't do that. Meiser Truma, there's a concern also that they're going to lose money. There's always, any business means you might lose, right?
So according to this, the Kohanim were responsible for also the upkeep, building of the walls, and maintenance of the streets in Jerusalem.
So far, it's just the Ram that the Kohanim were responsible. Oh, the temple funds, yeah, the temple funds would come from. It wasn't really the Kohanim, it was the whole community that was coming to the temple.
But who administered, who was the keeper of these funds and the collector?
Yeah, probably the Kohen Gadol.
Kohen.
This would explain the big fight of becoming a Kohen Gadol in the second base of Mikdash.
There's a lot of money here.
Yeah. No, well, this is the old, Washington, who's going to handle the money. So, there was also some spiritual things, but there was also some very practical, where the funds are going to be allocated. We're going to build new gymnasiums, or we're going to use it for other things. Whatever. Meiser Truma Maha Yaisimba. What would they do with the extra Truma money? Then it was the money that was taken out to buy animals if there was left over. So that rikuis of Tzipa the Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, that would be used to cover the golden plate that covered the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Rabbi Shmuel Eimer Meiser Aperis. We'll see what Meiser Aperis is. We have to see. We'll see in the Gemara. Keita Mizbeach. What was done with this is keeping the temple, the altar occupied when it was idle. They would bring all the sacrifice. Meiser Truma, l'klei sharis. Meiser Peres goes for Ketzah Mizbeach. Meiser Truma goes for klei sharis. We said before it goes to cover the walls. It also goes for the utensils. Rabbi Kiva Meiser Truma l'Ketzah Mizbeach. Rabbi Kiva says the Meiser Truma goes to the Ketzah Mizbeach. And what did Rabbi Shmuel say? He says the Meiser Peres went for that. Meiser Nesachim l'klei sharis. No Meiser. What's left over? Musa. Okay.
So we don't say Musa. When now when we see what's in front of us.
Rabbi Chananis Kanakayin and Maimer, Meiser Nesachim goes for Ketzah Mizbeach. What's left over from the wine and oil, that goes to the Ketzah Mizbeach. Meiser Truma l'klei sharis. who said Meiser Truma was the Klisharis? That was Rabbi Shmuel as well. And Rabbi Chananis Kanakanim says that as well. But they both didn't agree to the concept of the Meiser Paris. Okay. Keves Para. The Gemara talks about the Mishnah spoke about the ram. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonasan said, or Rabbi Nasan, Gimel L'Sheinasen. There were 3 streams of wool, of red wool. Shel Sair, the one that went on the goat, that was Besela. That cost the seller, or maybe not. I don't know if it cost means it had the weight of a seller. Could mean because it was longer. Why? It was because half of it went on the goat, half of it was put on the rock that was by the kayan that was pushing it off. And when it would fall down, this one would turn white, and then the one back over there. So the half of it was in the base of Mikdash, then was put on the goat, and then he would take it off, take half off, and put it on the Shel Mitzayra b'Shekel. There was another piece of wool that the Mitzayra used in his purification, and that was b'Shekel. That it was half of a selah. Shel Para, of the Paraduma, which that's what we spoke about, that's b'shtei slime. That was 2 slime. That was double the other one. Now the reason is because it says v'hishlach. You should throw it. We wanted something that had enough weight, and when you threw it, it actually threw, not would float around. Rab Chunya de Bras Chivrin, Rabbi Ba bar Zavda b'shem Rab Shimon ben Chalachta, shel para b'shtei slime u'mechza. It was more than shtei slime. It was 2 slime and a half. Some would call it 10 zuz. Each selah was 4 dinarim. A dinar is a zuz. It's the same thing. So 10 zuz is 2.5 selah. 4, 4, and 2. So it's the same thing. You call it 10 zuz, call it 2.5 slime. Meiser Shiari Lishka Chulu. Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Rabbi Shmuel. Talmidei Chachamim Amalamdim Hasakainim Hilchas Shchita Hilchas Kabbalah Hilchas Rika Neitan Tzchar Mitrumas Alishka. The sages that would teach the Kainim the laws of Shchita, Kabbalah, Zrika, who would teach them these laws? They needed to have someone over there teaching. Who would pay them? That would come from the Trumas Alishka, from the Shekalim. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Redifa, that's an interesting name. B'shem Rabbi Amy Mivakre Mumei Kachim Neitan Tzchar Mitrumas Alishka. People would have to look at the karbanos to see if there was a mum. Now, they had a certain, one carbon, the bachar, if it had a mum, it would belong to the kayanim. Now, there was a concern if he would be paid that he may be biased. So here what we're doing is that we're paying him for his time, not paying him for looking. So he would be on salary. That he was not biased. It didn't matter if he said yes or no. He would anyways go. Rab Acha, Rab Tan.
He's the building inspector.
No, he's looking at SAC. Yeah. Yeah, that's scary. Yeah. Rav Acha, Rab Tancham, Barchia, B'Shem, Rab Smalai, Magi, Sefer Azara, Nitin Tzchar Mitrumas Alishka. There were Torah scrolls in the Azara. They would take their also their money from Trumas Alishka. Okay, I guess we'll leave it over here. We can go to Davin.